Hello. Alright, so I just did a video last night talking about how the Democrats are not leftists, how they're basically right wing, and they. So I guess in a way there's like a follow up video or just at least related topic, like I just like some people really seem to act like they don't comprehend that anybody could ever not be what they claim to be, which is dumb on its face, right? Like people are like, but they pose as that. Like this is like when people mock, Marxists for disowning tankies, because we say like that's not real communism. It's not even real Marxism, and so they say. They just mock us because they have to, because their whole anti-communist worldview is just entirely based on that straw man of assuming that Stalin and Mao were the purest synthesis of Marxism. So it's like, it's basically like the fact of how right-wingers are so bullshitty about that. It basically shows they know they're wrong. Because if they didn't know they were wrong, then they would be open to actually finding out, like, okay, what is actual communism? And they wouldn't, like, no rational adult honestly believes that everybody is what they say they are, because that's what they go on. They're like, but Stalin literally said he was a socialist, right? His party was literally called the Communist Party, bro. And you libtards are gonna like, that's how fucking dumb this shit is. And so it's like transparent that they know they're wrong, because if they didn't know they're wrong, they wouldn't, like, when people say things that are so stupid that they clearly, like, they know they're wrong about that. Like, nobody's dumb enough to really think like that the only all you need to ascertain whether somebody is something is just to ask them. Like, nobody's literally that dumb. So if somebody is being that dumb, it's because there's a reason. It's because they're trying to avoid certain facts. Because conservatives who have, for whatever reason, staked so much of their identity and ego on being anti-communist and pro-capitalist, they just can't deal with the reality, because they've built their whole castle on sand, and that sand is their assumption that Stalin is was an honest Marxist. So they know they're wrong. Like I've like run myself ragged trying to like reason with them, and at this point, like, I realize like it's stupid, because they know they're wrong. Like, nobody's, like, that's a bad faith argument. When somebody's making a bad faith argument, it's basically because they know they're wrong. They don't want the facts to come out. So like, it's like saying like, well, like a lot of conservatives, they don't like Mitt Romney or, here, I'll just take this one. They don't like Mitt Romney or Jeb Bush or, certain people who they consider to be centrists or something, not conservative enough. But like, I'm sure Jeb Bush probably would call himself a conservative. So it's like, what, you're gonna say he's not a conservative? He literally called himself one. Like, it's just, you can take that argument in any direction, or you could say like anybody who calls themselves a Christian, right? Like, Obama, he called himself a Christian. So where are the conservatives lining up to be like, yeah, Obama clearly represents like the quintessential Christian leader? I mean, he said it, right? Just like how Stalin and Mao said they were like super Marxists and socialists and not just monarcho-fascists, even though, oddly enough, everything they did just seemed like monarcho-fascism. So yeah, it's like there's a lot of people who have a lot of other arguments that might be better, like for medical freedom and other types of freedom. They are correct, but when it comes to these economic issues, they know that their castle is built on sand. So that's when they really start getting crazy, when you try to like debate with them about that type of stuff. But I also, so yeah, it's just like you should never assume that just because somebody says they are something, they are that. Like even if, I don't know, like ideally people should learn this in infancy, or like as soon as they can learn anything, you should learn not to just trust what people say, right? But like so much of political debate and rhetoric is based around completely uncritical acceptance of like, well, they said it, so you know, there could never be any person under false pretenses trying to help sabotage a movement that they're not actually committed to. So like, but I was just thinking of also about like, I mean, the Democratic Party is like pretty avowedly right wing and has basically always been, you know, like they look what they did to like anybody who's to the left of like center, basically at all. They will bring out everything in their arsenal to completely destroy that person. So they did that to, you know, they did that to Howard Dean until he became a good boy for them. They obviously did that to Bernie. You know, they do that to all kinds of people. So the Democratic Party, like, they've always been right-wing. Like, Bill Clinton was, like, pretty avowedly, like, yeah, I'll get these people off welfare. And, like, you know, he was a neoliberal, like Reagan. And it's unfortunate, like, I see so many people, like, even Jimmy Dore and, like, all, and, you know, the gray zone people and stuff, like, totally misusing the term neoliberal. Like, I used to be against the word neoliberal, like, in the 90s or whenever it first became, like, prevalent, because basically for the reason that everybody misuses it. Like, there's a relatively small amount of people who know what that word means, and there's like 100 times more people that don't know what the word means and misuse it. So the modern, like the more common usage of it is just to mean anybody who's calls themselves a liberal, but they're somehow some new bad type of liberal, like corporatist, or sometimes even broader than that, like they're just too woke or something. You know, it's just like, it's just used to almost mean anything, but it's almost always used nowadays to refer to Democrats and you know, people that are supposedly left of center or pose as left of center. And that's not what the word means. The word neoliberal means Reaganite. It means a follower of, it means a capitalist. So it's just sad when, like, if we can't know what words mean, there's no point in talking at all. Like, if we can't agree on the definitions of the words we're saying, Like if everybody chooses their own definition of every word, then talking is a mistake. And hearing people talk is a mistake if you don't have any agreed upon actual definitions. So yeah, neoliberalism was coined by Reagan, basically people around Reagan, and it means Reaganomics. So a lot of people nowadays, they will talk about like the neoliberal Democrats and the neoconservative Republicans. It's like, I mean, it's obvious how they got this misconception, because A, that's kind of what it might sound to some people like it's saying, and B, there's so many people with this misconception that, you know, there's literally like almost nobody who uses these terms who seems to know what they mean. So especially neoliberal, like there's a few more people that know what neoconservative means. But the fact is that neoliberals are neoconservatives. And not only do they happen to be neoconservatives, they're just the same people. Like the same people who founded neoliberalism founded neoconservatism. You know, it's like, that's those people. Like the neoconservatives are the Reaganites. So it's not like one is completely dependent on the other. They just suck in both of those ways. I'm sure they suck in a million other ways too. But so that's like semantic thing. But I hope people take this on board and not just say, well, if people think it means that, then it means that. No, it's still like there still are people who know what these words mean. And you can still Google it and find out what these words mean. Like neoliberal, neoconservative refers to all the Reaganites and all the imperialists, and it includes the Clintons, Reagan, Bush. It includes every president that we've had over since Reagan. So yeah, Clinton, Obama, Bush, Trump, Biden, they're all neoliberals, they're all neoconservatives. But another thing I wanted to talk about was like outside of just like the straight up Democratic Party machine and loyalists and stuff, like the hypocrites, and also apart from the tanky regimes like the Stalin and Mao, whatever, there's a lot of like leftists who are fake, like hypocrites, and but it's like a lot of people on the right just take it for granted that anybody who poses as a leftist is completely honest, and it really is fully and honestly Marxist and leftist and liberal and all these things. It's like you can't on the one hand say these people are trash and then say that you implicitly trust everything they say about themselves. It's fucking dumb. Like anyway, I grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And so like I grew up around like Democrats and leftists and SJWs. That's kind of a term that can be used to mean like, I think like pseudo leftists, or sometimes people call them regressive leftists. Basically like people who are under the guise of leftism, they're basically authoritarian scum. And like it's not like, like I say, I grew up in the Bay Area and I've always known them. I mean, think of it this way, like people are like, well, how could a leftist do this? Like people on the left, sometimes they're like, I mean, I understand, maybe I say that too, but it's like, how could a leftist do this or that or say this or that? But the thing is, like, despite what some like very either dishonest or stupid or both like people claim of, like, there's all these like memes I keep seeing nowadays on Facebook of people literally claiming that the universities are not liberal leftists, that they're not politically biased, and that the school system and everything, that there's no politics in the, which is so dumb. Like, I mean, I'm a leftist, but I'm honest enough to like say like, yeah, a lot of professors are Marxists. I mean, I don't know if at least they were, like, they have been for the last like several decades, probably the last like 50 years, they've been, university professors have been disproportionately Marxist, at least on paper. And often they do mistreat people who are conservative and whatever, give them lower grades probably. And so, but it's like, when you think of that, it's like, okay, the Bay Area, like if I, like my elementary school I went to in San Jose, Silicon Valley, in the 80s and 90s, I guess, was our teachers were mostly basically liberal, and they would mostly promote more or less liberal things. I mean, who knows? Then there was also like pretty centrist, and then, I mean, they're largely Democratic loyalists, but the Democrats like pose as leftists. So either way, it's like, for the most bootlicking conformists, they're obviously going to identify as leftists, or at least liberals, because that's what the teachers were, and that's what, it's like, there's very few relationships that are more like hierarchical than teacher-student, like in an elementary school or even a high school or something. So, I mean, I was always leftist, but not really for that reason. I think more because I just agreed with it. But I knew that a lot of my fellow students from earliest times, or at least by, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade, when politics became a thing. I mean, honestly, there was not a huge amount of politics in school, but there was often probably like at least a light kind of assumption that, we're all Democrats here, we're all liberals, we're all left of center, we're the good people, we're not like those bad conservative people. So it's like, being a leftist in California, not only does it not require you to be anti-authoritarian, you would basically have to be anti-authoritarian to not identify as that. I'm not saying any of these people like actually are leftists or liberal. I mean, California, very few people in California have any regard for liberty, or, I mean, there are a lot of people, but maybe percentage-wise, like more, or at least a lot of people in California that identify as liberal or leftist, they are not. They don't have any. They just identify as that because they live in California, and they live in coastal California, and that's what their teachers were and expected of their students. But it's much more dramatic in university. Like, I never went to college. Like, I've sat in on a few classes, but I just, like, I never wanted to go to any kind of school. Like, I was forced to go to school. I barely graduated high school because my parents had to pay me money to graduate because I had no interest in that shit. I still wish I had like not wasted that time in my life and done something more productive, but at least my parents gave me like $1,000 or something. So, okay, cool. or $2,000. So that was like the most money that I've ever got paid for anything in my life, basically. And pissed it away, like visiting my girlfriend in Barbados. And then she dumped me on the plane ride home. Yeah. But I know enough about like the colleges, and I lived at UCSC for half a year, like my last 6 months of high school. I was doing independent study through a school in Palo Alto, and I was living at the University of, UCSC, UC Santa Cruz, which is, one of the most leftist universities, I guess. But I mean, I'm sure like pretty much all the UCs are leftist. And so it's like, if you go to college, you would have to be anti-authoritarian not to be a leftist. Like, I'm anti-authoritarian and I would still be a leftist. But if somebody is just a hardcore conformist bootlicker, they're going to do what their professor says. So, I mean, this is the danger of when, like anti-authoritarian movements get some kind of ascendancy, because they can very quickly become authoritarian, because, I mean, that's the thing, like, that's why hierarchy is bad, because hierarchy begets hierarchy, and it will defend its position regardless of anything else. So I've known lots of people who had clearly zero principles. Like, they would stab their mother if like that was the thing that they were told to do, and that made them the good student or worker or liberal or whatever it was. Like I've known a lot of these people. Like, I mean, look at California, like San Francisco, there's so many homeless people. If there were real leftists there, they would be giving, they would have ended homelessness, or at least they would have like mitigated it a lot more. But the fact is, like, it's just like leftism is just PR for like a lot of people. Like, the majority of visible, prominent liberals or Democrats and SJWs and stuff, it's just like, obviously they're not going to say, hi, we're just a fascist scum who will do anything for hierarchy and to be elite. No, they're going to come up with some cover story like, oh no, we're actually liberals, we're leftists, we support, all these good things. Just like people claiming to be Christian when they're going around molesting boys and bombing Arabs and stuff like this. It's just, but yeah, I've known a lot of like university students who I know them, they have no principles. They'll do anything to be with the elite and for their ego and power. But of course they pose as leftists because that's what the hierarchy they're part of uses, as its either there were legit leftist professors, and then so these people are just conforming so they don't fall afoul of those authorities, or the whole thing, even with a lot of the professors, is just a cover story to defend their freaking capitalist elitist bullshit. Because I mean, if all these professors were so Marxist, and like how much inroads against capitalism have really been made? I mean, I think like any philosophy that requires principles and bravery, you will find a million people claiming to be that for every one person who actually is that. That's true whether it's like Christianity, of like at least the positive aspects of Christianity. You'll find a million people will claim to be Christian and almost none will actually follow it. And that's the same with leftism. Maybe it's the same with conservatism. I don't really know. But I've known a lot of these people that are extremely arrogant, and a lot of times their leftism is inseparable from their hatred of poor people, because they went to college, so they're better than the poor people. And in college, they learned this Marxist or liberal or SJW stuff. So that becomes their way to oppress the poor, and a very convenient way to do so, because it poses as being pro-poor, or it poses as being egalitarian. So it's not just out and out like, hey, we're evil, what's up? It's like, oh no, we're good. It's the wolf in sheep's clothing. Every wolf is going to put on sheep's clothing if they can. That's to be expected. If a wolf doesn't put on the sheep's clothing, then they're less of a wolf. Or they're just a literal wolf and they don't know how to wear clothes and stuff. But metaphorically speaking, that's the norm. If somebody's bad, they're going to lie and they're going to pretend they're good, and they're going to ally themselves with some good ideologies and whatever that is. So it's no surprise to me when I see that so many supposed leftists are, rabidly anti-poor, and even, cover for Zionism, or even blatantly racist, when they get all upset when non-white people don't toe the line for their kind of political dogmas, and they get really furious with them. It's so much blatantly racist stuff that the supposed leftists have said. It never surprises me, because I grew up around these people. I'm sure there's a million people who, if it was in Alabama, there's a million people who probably pose as conservatives, but they're not really going to stand up for conservatism. They say, oh yeah, I support, Second Amendment, but they're not really going to put anything on the line, and they might actually backstab their fellow, quote unquote conservatives if it's convenient for them. That's reality. It's it's a bad faith argument if anybody really pretends that they think everybody is exactly what they claim to be, because nobody's that dumb. Nobody who's at all functional really thinks that everybody is what they say they are. So if they're pretending to think oh well, they call themselves a conservative, so they are, or they call themselves a leftist or a liberal, therefore they are, that's a bad faith argument, because nobody really would be that naive. So anyway, I make it my business to root out fake leftists, because that's what real leftists do. You have to have doctrinal purity, and you can't have solidarity with the enemy while they're trying to sabotage you. So anybody who's well, I have solidarity with anybody who tells me they're a leftist, then no, that's stupid. That's bad faith. That's somebody who's either deliberately helping the sabotage, or they're just so lazy and they're using that to give themselves a pass, so they don't have to actually figure out who has principles and who doesn't. Anyway, so yeah, I've been studying these kind of pseudo lefties my entire life, and I will, I'm at war with them basically, and will always be. So that's my spiel, and take care.